Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me for another episode of the Estrella podcast. Before I get started in introducing today's guest, if you would like to learn more information about the Estrella platform that is launching soon, please visit estrella.chat, where you'll be able to receive more information and updates as to what's going on. Now, for today's guest, I'm really excited to introduce astrologer Kathy Biehl. Hi, Kathy. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm wonderful. I'm wonderful. So, I'm really excited to talk to you today because you have a very different perspective and take on your astrology and how you go about dealing with your clients and working with them. And I would like to learn more about that, if that's okay.
Sure. What can I tell you?
So, what initially, if somebody were to ask, what would initially separate you from any other astrologer?
Well, I come out of the Western tradition, so there are a lot of people who have the general background that I have. But one thing that's different is that I have an incredibly diverse life experience, and that informs everything I do. I've got decades as an attorney. I'm a longtime writer. I've run small businesses, and I'm also a performer. I've represented people as an attorney going through all kinds of different problems. So the first thing is I understand a lot about how the world actually works, and I have held people's hands through pretty much any problem someone could come to me with. So I bring a real world perspective. But on top of that, I tend to, and other astrologers do this, but I tend to connect dots. I look at things in terms of recurring cycles, of looking for a storyline, uh, to see how something is playing out and what happened before, how you dealt with something before, because that often gives an indicator of how you might be dealing with it this time or what might be happening this time as a cycle comes around again. I mostly work with people who want to understand what is going on right now and what they can do with it over the next 6 months to a year. I can and I do interpret birth charts, but most of the people who come to me are old enough that they have some basic understanding of how they work, and they want to know what is going on now and what can I do with it. So there are several answers for you all kind of together.
I
Also,
have
I'm
so,
intuitive and funny.
oh,
So, you know, those things add to it as well.
I love that. There's so many questions that I want to ask. I'll start off with my first one. I didn't know that there was a difference between Western and Eastern astrology. Could you explain the difference between the two?
Oh boy, there's actually that isn't the only delineation. There are
Well,
many different approaches to astrology, many different even within Western. And so the big breakdown of what you're talking about has to do with which zodiac you use and how
mm.
you look at the sky. And that gets so complicated to explain. Let's just leave it at that.
Okay, fair enough. What made you decide that the type of astrology that you study and that you give to your clientele, what made you decide that that was the right one for you in your practice?
It just evolved. I've been doing this for 35 years or so, and I've taken lots and lots of classes and lots of workshops and added different techniques and tools to it, and it's just been the way I look at charts now. I give people much more useful information than I did initially. When you're first starting out, it is really easy to get caught in the details of, and then this is happening, and then this is happening, and then this is happening. And I have learned over time how to translate what I'm seeing into a story or language, at least, that makes sense to the client that they can use.
Mhm.
So I don't, it's been an organic process, and I couldn't even begin to tell you when the different gear shifts happened. But
Yes.
even just in the last 10 years, things have evolved into a different way of how I pass the information on to people.
Mhm. What I find interesting is that you had said previously that you were in law. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
that is, I mean, two totally different uh, studies, career types. I mean, law versus being an astrologer. What made you decide while you were studying law and practicing law, what made you decide to transition over to becoming an astrologer?
The astrology interest way predated law. Okay. Law was something I decided in a panic in my late teens that I would do so that I could support myself.
Hmm.
To be honest, I haven't enjoyed a whole lot about it, but early in my career, I started actually taking classes at an astrology institute in Houston. And that was much more interesting to me, actually. And, I just kind of worked into, I was self employed 3 years out of law school. I left working for an employer. So, being self employed, I had multiple interests and multiple career tracks. And I was also a freelance writer, and I was taking astrology classes. And then I started doing readings for people. And there was a store in Houston that I started working out of a bit. And by the end, 20 years into it, I was paying my office rent on my law office just from my readings. So they were going pretty well. And I relocated to the Northeast right before, it's so funny to say this, the turn of the century. And I just started doing more and more. The more that life moved online, the easier it was to just be more and more of an astrologer and to move my forecasts that way and my newsletters. And a few years ago, I was still doing things for law clients, but the equation really, really shifted much more toward the astrology side. And I will just mention there aren't a whole lot of astrologer attorneys, but we do exist
Wow.
because there's a research component that is similar in both of them. And astrology is an extraordinarily logic based system, believe it or not. I mean, you have to be able to cast things and understand things and research and deal with a lot of data. And there is a piece of it that isn't that far off from the mindset or the skills that are necessary to be a good attorney, believe it or not.
I That was so well put. I never thought of that. That astrology and lawyers, they have commonalities. And now that you've mentioned all that, that is very true. Thank you for saying that, because now it puts things into a different perspective for me when it comes to lawyers and what they do. Um,
Mhm.
so let me ask you this, Kathy. Did you have a mentor along the way when you were like, okay, I'm not happy doing this anymore with law. I want to start, looking into astrology and going down that path. Was there an influence that you had in your life, or intuitively were you just guided to go down this path?
Well, I walked into a bookstore and I saw a flyer for classes and I went, "Oh, I'll do that." So I started taking classes in the evening. There were a couple of people who were my first teachers, but really it was just, it amused me. I wanted to learn more. I had been very interested from junior high on in all things. At that time, we called it occult. Now it's more metaphysical. And I actually had a sun sign column in my high school newspaper. Still not quite sure how that happened. It was in Southern Baptist territory, and it wasn't predicting. It was just, each month I'd write about whatever the personality was of the where the sun was at that time. So then I'd spotlight people in the school that were, the Tauruses in the school or the Capricorns in the school or something. So this is something, it had been there. It had just been something I had read a lot about and looked into a lot and just decided to indulge myself with it.
Yes, yes. You cracked me up when you were saying how you could spot the Tauruses, and I can't imagine. That is so funny to me. Um, so, diving deeper into when you're actually in the process of doing your astrology readings,
Hmm.
if I may ask, what are some of the commonalities that you notice immediately when you're viewing a chart?
Very frequently, new clients have something that directly contacts something in my chart. So if
Mm,
somebody doesn't come to me through a referral, if they've seen me on YouTube, for example, it's really freaky funny how many people show up who resonate with me because their chart interlocks with mine. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is there are, at any given time, there are some major astrological influences in play. And it's really common that whoever walks in, whoever wants a reading, is having or is experiencing the impact of those influences. It's really rare that somebody wants a reading who isn't being hit by what
mm.
everybody's being hit by. So like there are seasons or there are epidemics of influences. And okay, everybody's dealing with fill in the blank right now. Does
Yes,
that make
yes.
sense?
Yes, it does. When you're talking to a client about, for example, you notice a karmic pattern or a cyclical pattern in a behavior in your client or something that they keep experiencing with a certain type of individual, what could you name an example of what how did you allow them to change that pattern? Like, what advice did you give them to say, hey, you got to start doing this in order for this to stop?
Well, I endeavor not to tell my clients what to do.
Mm,
Although I'm sure I break that more than I want to admit. Um, in a situation like what you're describing, I will well, there are a couple of ways I can go about it because I do have targeted readings for particular issues, like for relationship issues or
mm,
for money issues. And when I go through that, we examine how the wiring shows up in the chart and other ways you might express the influences or hidden factors that aren't at the top of your mind that you might take into account.
mhm,
Um, if it's just here's what's going on and oh by the way this thing keeps happening, why do I keep attracting people who fill in the blank, we can look at what in a person either resonates with that or magnetizes it or fits what
mhm,
you have been brought up to believe. And then there is always another way that an influence can play out because astrology has spectrums of okay, this particular like this planet in this sign in this house could mean here's a spectrum, and then you see how it is communicating with other planets,
mhm,
or you can see if there is a particular mode of behavior that shows up in many different influences. And so those would be more wired in. So you it's difficult. It's risky to simply look at one point in the chart and say, okay, you are doomed to X because you have Venus in this sign. But
mhm,
if you've got a particular way that your relationship planet has been playing out, odds are there are other parts of the chart that are saying the same thing. So you're kind of being nudged in that direction.
mhm, mhm. Have you ever had a client, Kathy, that has come to you and said, I would like to have an astrology reading for the whole year or for the next 90 days? And as you're looking at their chart, you notice that, well, maybe we should focus on your love life because I'm seeing things here that I probably keep happening, or maybe we should focus on finances because I've noticed that this keeps happening. Have you ever found that you've had to kind of change the script during your readings?
Oh, yeah, but, that's part of what happens, and I always go in with, the general framework, and sometimes, like, here are the big things that I see going on, and here's a timeline for when various things are being hit, And real frequently, because of what is playing out, I will expect, okay, this person's going to want to talk about career, or this person has a lot going on with, career or money, or, oh man, this person's relationship is really on the hot seat. But I always ask people at the outset, why did you come? What is it you're looking for? And if someone says something that is not at all what I saw, I'll go, okay, here's what I have for you. Let's I'll answer your question, but are you also interested in? And then I'll give them other options, and usually they are.
I like that. I like that you give your clients the options of switching gears if that needs to happen during a
Oh
session. I
yeah.
think that's important. Absolutely. So, going along with astrology still, I wanted to ask your viewpoint. Do you feel that you you are you have psychic abilities and astrology abilities at the same time? Is it possible to be an astrologer and not have psychic abilities? What is your
Yes.
take on that?
Oh, you can be absolutely scientific with it and just go through things according to all of the different techniques that you use. I I tend to bring now I don't read them intuitively. I don't throw the rules out. Uh, like, you'll run into people who will just kind of, oh, this is what I'm getting. Ooh, and that's not what I do.
Mhm.
But if I I often get a sense of where something is going, or what um, how something how thing not specifically what is going to happen, but ways in which somebody might experience something, if that makes more sense. Yeah, my intuition definitely does play a role, and I do think that is part of why my forecasts are have a level of accuracy that have caused people to send me texts full of expletives.
Wow,
Yeah, so it's
that's
part of it,
amazing.
because there are a lot of different ways something could go, but I'll just kinda get a, "Okay, I see what's happening here," and I'll just add that to what I'm saying.
Yes. Now, do you use any form of scientific techniques in your readings when you're doing your astrology readings for your clients, or is it 100% intuitive?
Oh,
Are there
no,
any
not at
tools?
all intuitive. No, no, I certainly chart out all of the transits and see what the different relationships between the planets are, and it's geometric, essentially.
Mhm.
You're looking at geometric aspects,
Yes.
and I'll have the timelines and stuff, but then intuition can be the bridge, like, okay, I see this and this and this, and these things go together. This goes together.
Yes. So every astrologer, Kathy, has their own technique and style. So
Yeah.
how did you hone in and develop your own technique and style? How did you do that? A, and B, how long did it take to do that?
Well, I've been studying astrology for since the early 80s.
Wow.
And I've been uh, so what I've done has morphed and evolved and grown and morphed and evolved, depending on, I'll take new classes, learn new techniques, add new tricks and tools to what I'm doing. It's been an evolving process, and I can't give you a, okay, on this date it switched into boom. Now, I will say, at some point in the last little more than 10 years, 12, 13 years, maybe 14, another astrologer named Donna Woodwell, who was the founding editor, producer, manager of a community called Astrology Hub, gave me the term storytelling astrology for what she saw me as doing. And I looked at it and went, you're right. That's a good word for it.
Mhm.
So somebody else had to see it and go, "Oh, hey, call it this." Like, "Oh, yeah, all right, that's what I'll call it."
Yes. May I ask, Kathy, what are three differences that you've noticed from astrology from the 1980s up to this point?
Well, with everything being so available online now, it is possible to learn things and to um, take classes with. people that you may never have had contact with. I was in a big city for the early part of my studies, and that meant that people actually would come through town. So I got to meet and study with people who were pretty pivotal in the field at the time, but now you could be anywhere on the planet and learn this. Secondly, it's kind of like been popularized much more in the mainstream, and there are a lot of people running around acting like they know what they do who don't really quite know what they do. So the popularity has led to a terrific amount of posing and misinformation, and
Mm,
that's always really annoying to me because for a lot of my life, I've had to battle the perception of this is crackpot, or this is a pseudoscience, or there's something that's not right here. And then, it's great that it's easier to be open about it. I don't hide it from my Facebook feed anymore. I swear to you, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I kept it all separate because I knew there were a lot of people who didn't want to even go near it.
yes.
But but the popularity has also led to a lot of uh, trivializing or oversimplifying, or I mean, I love that people are interested in it,
Mm,
but there's a lot of bad information that has run out. And the third
yeah.
thing is what I call the hallmarkization of
Mm,
astrology. There are certain events that suddenly become really trendy, like, oh, Mercury's going retrograde. And if someone says Mercury is in retrograde, that's your red flag right there. You don't use the word
mm,
in front of it. But there are concepts that people have just taken and they run with it. And I see all these non-astrologers pontificating about astrological phenomena and popularizing them in a way that, on the one hand, yay, good. On the other hand, I'm cringing. You're not saying it right, and you're reaching a lot of people with some
right.
slightly off info.
You're so correct about that, Kathy. I just wrote a blog last year about how spirituality has become a fad. I mean,
Yes,
you
yes.
look around and it's like the crystals, the stones, like you said, Mercury in retrograde. Like so many things have become such a fad that you are right. You got to be careful of knowing what's real and what's not, what's embellished. So what, if I may ask, going on that, what recommendation would you give viewers of, it could be the littlest tip of knowing what signs to look for when something seems like it could be a fad and embellished and when something seems more legit?
Well, the first thing is audience size does not mean the person knows what they're doing.
Mm,
There are some people with very, very large platforms, particularly on TikTok, who, they draw tons of people, but they don't. So don't let numbers give credibility. That's the first
mm,
thing.
that's a good one.
Uh, Notice if someone is saying something that is straying from what other people are saying. I mean, there are certain astrologers who are really readily reliable, and I would, if for example, if you're watching somebody on YouTube and they put charts up and they actually go through the charts and explain the charts, that is a good sign.
Mm,
It might be more than you want to deal with, but that is something you could take of, all right, this person is doing this. Yay. I would say, I'll just name a few, the Astro twins who have a column for Elle magazine, I think,
mhm.
completely legit. Chani Nicholas, she has an app, completely legit. She has an empire of astrologers working for her. Her stuff, she manages to present it in a way that is very, very accessible to anybody and very lively. And she's absolutely legit. Um, there are a lot of like boomer astrologers that are, if someone's been around for a long time, that's actually a good sign too. But there are different ways you can get it. If someone is just giving you aspects and explaining the technicalities, that might not have use for you. You
Right.
might really, it might be more useful for you to have someone who says, here's how it's going to affect you. Because
Hmm.
I use astrology you can use as the tagline for my own stuff, because why we have so much content flying at us all the time. Why
Right.
not choose something that actually speaks to your life?
Right. I couldn't agree more. Very well said. And speaking of Chani, I actually follow her. So I get her emails and notifications. So it's very interesting that you brought her up.
Yeah,
Um, yeah.
Chani's for
So
real. She's for
yeah,
real.
that's awesome. So you may not know the answer to this, but it just crossed my mind. Kathy, do you know if there are any colleges or universities that offer astrology classes? Is there an astrology degree that viewers can uh, pursue if they're interested in furthering their education? What um, what would you how would you help viewers go about educating themselves further when it comes to astrology?
There is in the United States, Kepler College, Kepler. It has lots and lots and lots of online classes. It did for a while actually offer a degree. I don't believe that it's like a BA. I don't believe it's doing that anymore. There's the London School of Astrology, which also offers a lot of classes online. Um, there are a number of astrologers who have certification programs where you can take courses with them. So it's, I would look around, but I'd start with Kepler and the London School of Astrology. It's possible if you want to go to Wales, you can get a degree. No, there's a place in, I think in Bath. There are places in Britain where you can actually get degrees,
Wow.
but you can certainly learn an awful lot short of getting a bachelor's or a master's in something.
Mhm. How often, Kathy, would you say that somebody who is studying astrology should refresh their skills or should hone in on learning a new aspect in their craft when it comes to astrology?
I would just keep abreast of what's being talked about and what's going on. It depends. It depends on what you're doing with your knowledge. If you're talking to people, whatever, it has historically in the U.S. in particular, there have been conferences pretty regularly of several big astrological groups. And going to a conference, it's kind of mind blowing because you can go uh, spend a couple of days just going from lecture to lecture to lecture to lecture, and then you'll bankrupt yourself with all the books you buy. But those are increasingly being done online as well. So it's a personal thing, I would say. I certainly wouldn't keep my head in the sand about what is going on. And I've been doing this for decades, and I'll see a class and go, well, this looks interesting. I'll do this. Like, okay, I'll take this. I'll take that. I take things at Kepler. There are certain astrologers whose little courses I'll take now and again. So just there's certainly a lot of information flying around, and it is not difficult to stay on top of it, actually.
Yes. Is there a routine, Kathy, that you follow or heavily practice before performing or going over your first reading? So, do you meditate? Is there a certain type of fruit or meal that you eat?
Nope.
Nope.
Nope. I just look at the chart. I actually, I mean, there's just a way I prepare a chart. And I
Mhm.
got this from an astrologer who's now in Pennsylvania named Amanda Owen, Owen. She's also a photographer and an author. But I had attended a talk with her years and years ago in New York City, and she had this idea of actually writing every placement of the chart down from lowest zodiac degree to highest, so you can actually chart. It's really easy to see what sequence things in the chart get hit by transits. That's the only thing I do. I will chart that out, then I'll write the transits around the chart. I do things by hand because A, I learned that way, and B, it gets it into me. It's just the way I work. Other people can just eyeball a chart and know it, but I'm from the days when you had to actually calculate the chart
Mm.
houses. I could not do it now. I have no idea how we did it. It's been blotted out of my brain. But so that's all I do. My only routine is chart prep. I don't do anything else because
Yes.
it's the research for it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Have you ever had a chart that you looked over where you viewed it, got your analysis, maybe stepped away for a minute, came back and was like, oh, I didn't even see that. Let me add that to my
Sure.
client's analysis as well. What do you think allows you to see that new revelation the second time around when you're viewing someone's chart?
I don't know, fresh look beats me.
Yeah.
I did for a long time have a cat, and one time I had my laptop on the couch, and there were a whole bunch of charts open, and she walked over and just started pawing it, and I went, "Ah, come on, quit it." And I looked, and she had whatever she had done, a chart popped up that I looked at and went, "Oh, I hadn't seen that." Like, "Did you do this on purpose?"
That's so cute. I love that you add humor to your astrology readings and with your clients. What made you decide to bring that humor aspect to what you do?
It's because 'cause I'm a smart ass. I don't know. It's who I actually am. It's who I am.
Yes.
So,
I remember actually when I first interviewed you, you made me laugh. I got off thinking she is so funny. So, um, if I may
oh,
ask, this is such a side topic or side question, but have you ever done stand up? Have you ever done um, comedy of any sorts? Because you genuinely are funny.
I wrote a zine for 10 years. I just have a it's been in my writing, but no, I haven't done stand up. When I was, well, I did have a one-woman show that had a lot of, sarcasm in it and humor, but
Mhm.
no, not stand up. I have not done that. It could still happen.
Yes. Are there any clients that you teach? Do you yourself have your own students that you teach astrology to?
I've done it off and on over the years. It's hard for me to set the time commitment down. I do have recurring classes on topics that people have been interested in. For example, there's a group of people who've been working with me for years. Every year we'll go, okay, it's time to look at all the charts of the royal family. Okay, so we'll do that. And periodically I'll have a targeted class. So there are people who have studied with me for a long, long time,
Mhm.
but
Um,
not normal way.
are you open to taking a client if they're like, "Hey, I'd like you to take me on individually and teach me what it is that you know." Are you open to that, or is it something that, like you had said previously, that you need to have the energy and the wanting to do?
It's a question of time. I mean, and
Mhm,
to make that financially worthwhile would be kind of prohibitive for the
mhm,
person. I do have uh, some of my courses available on video. I have a
mhm,
building blocks of astrology course. I think it's 6 videos. And I have taught multiple levels of storytelling astrology to teach people how to track stories through the chart. And I've had requests, and it's just been so hard because, to be honest, lately I have been doing so much political forecasting that it has eaten up
mm.
any bandwidth that I had for that kind of thing. So there might be a time again when that will come around, but it's not happening right now.
Okay. Do you do astrology readings for married couples or for people in relationships or even
Yeah.
friends? Have you ever done more than one person at one
Yeah. Oh,
time?
yeah. Yeah. Right. And usually you look at what the challenges are, or I have found that differences in either how people accept and experience love and differences in how people communicate tend to be the big problem areas. So those are things we talk
Mhm.
about a lot
So
about how
commu
someone is different. Doesn't
so
mean that they're right or wrong, but that's where I have seen the problems.
So you're finding communications like the common denominator when it comes to relationships. And do you find that, interesting question, do you find that the communication aspect is more in the women or the men?
There's no gender attached to it.
There's no, okay,
Because it
okay.
really honestly, it's people communicate differently. And if you
Yes,
think it takes a while to open your brain up to the concept that somebody might not be intentionally doing something to you, they might just have a brain that works differently than yours.
very well said. Kathy, may I ask, have you ever had an astrology reading with a married couple where maybe their marriage was a little rocky and the astrology reading brought clarity and actually helped them overcome those challenges that they were dealing with prior to getting that reading with you?
I don't know the I don't know that. I have seen ones where I pointed out where the issues were going to be, and later they parted, and that those issues were part of the
Mm,
problem, but I don't have a
yes.
success story to report because if things are going well, people tend to not be in touch.
They don't typically let you know. Yes.
Well,
Um,
one person, yeah, like, "Oh, I got my job." I get that kind of email, but no,
yes.
no.
What do you find is the most rewarding thing about what you do in astrology?
Hmm. Getting to know people, and I think what I really, really like is when someone comes to me who isn't sitting there passively saying, "Tell me what's gonna happen," but instead actually has some idea of their own, to use a currently popular word, agency, like some idea of, okay, there are things I have an element of control over, and what can I do to work with whatever the situation is to push it more into something that is satisfying. And I like that when I see somebody who's actually openly grappling with what's going on in their life and not sitting there expecting me to tell them, "This is what will be." No, I will not do that because who knows? Who knows what will be? I can tell
Mhm.
you what might be and what you might do to make that more likely, but
Yes. There are viewers, maybe some of the viewers, or even people out in the world that have separated, for example, astrologers from regular people. But at the end of the day, I believe that you guys are no different than any of us that aren't practicing astrology. What would you say to viewers? How would you let them know that you're normal too? And you bleed, you live your life, you have good days, bad days. Like, how would you allow the viewers to um, relate to you and know that you're there's nothing that they can't accomplish if they too want to be an astrologer?
well, it's it's a profession, it's a vocation, it's a passion, just like pretty much any other one. I mean, you could take the word astrologer out of your questions and put pretty much any other
Mm,
activity noun in there, and it would fit.
mhm.
Um, I mean, we the one way we're different is something will happen in the news, and many of us will go, "Whoa!" And we'll immediately try to see what the symbolism is, like the astrological symbolism that's at play, and that other people don't do that. But apart from that, we tend to want to help people and to do well, and there's a bit of a counselor streak in most of us, um, like pretty much anybody else that you'd be a friend with, quite honestly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Not putting out anybody's name or information out there. Has there ever been a situation where you've had to help another astrologer through a reading where maybe they were struggling with something and you were able to look at their chart and say, hey,
Oh,
there
sure.
were, okay, okay.
Yeah, I mean, people it's always easier to, see somebody else's stuff than your own stuff. So, yes, I have done readings for other astrologers, yes.
And you yourself go to other astrologers for your own personal readings, or do you do your own personal readings?
I have asked actually, I don't pay a whole lot of attention to my own astrology anymore, which is kind of funny. No, I consult with other astrologers now and again. Yeah. If it's a
Okay.
particular thing, like, okay, I want to hear what your take is on what I see coming. So I'll just sit
Mhm.
back.
Now, when you've had other astrologers do your readings, has it always been Western astrology, or have you had them do Eastern on you?
No, I've never used Vedic astrology. No.
Okay. Okay. So, Kathy, we're nearing the end of this interview, and it's been such a pleasure speaking to you. I have a question to ask you. So, for anybody who is interested in going down this path, who has always looked at astrology, had interest, been curious, what advice would you give them to start their astrology journey?
I would focus on a couple of, well, first off, I'd read anything I can get my hands on. And online, I would focus on a couple of information sources and just follow them along and see what you want to learn more about. Start with the basics of houses and signs and planets, but you could decide, oh, I want to know everything about, I want to learn about asteroids, or I want to, there are all these other kinds of bodies, and there are different schools of astrology again. So I would read articles at astro.com, astro.com. There's a good place to start. Everything is absolutely reliable there, and it covers, their stuff covers a spectrum of possibilities. That and then look into what Kepler College is doing. Um, they have some really accessible entry level courses, and again, London School of Astrology. So those are ways I would start. And you might pick a couple of astrologers to follow, like on Instagram or YouTube or TikTok. And I would encourage picking different age groups. All right. Don't
Mm.
just have astrologers in their 20s, and see who has a level of consistency of speaking to you and like, okay, this is the way I like to go about things. You might not want to just have someone who does, what is your, what's your pudding pop flavor for your sun sign, or what's your anime character? I mean, that's fun, but it's not going to teach you a lot.
Yes, good stuff. And lastly, if any of the viewers want to get a hold of you, what platforms can they find you on? Do you have an email address or a website that they can contact you from? Is there any information that they can receive from you in order to get a reading done?
I'm a bunch of places. My website is empowermentunlimited.net. And I have a newsletter from that site that goes out every Monday morning with direct links to all of my latest forecasts and activities. I have a podcast for each week that's 7 to 11 minutes long. I have a forecast for every new and full moon and for every month, in addition to the services that I have. All of these are also on my YouTube channel, Professional Aquarian, where I have a giant playlist of the political astrology as well. That's not on my website. I'm on Instagram, Kathy Biehl, my first name, first initial, second initial, and my last name. And I have a Patreon, patreon.com/Kathy Biehl, that has levels from $1 to $35. And the lowest level gets you, all of the levels get you 45 to 60-second daily snarky forecasts that will focus the day for you. And then there's a lot of other information there as well.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Kathy. And thank you to all of you for watching another episode of the Estrella podcast. I'm Danielle Miranda. And don't forget, if you would like to learn more information about the Estrella platform, please go to estrella.chat. Thank you so much, Kathy. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
All right, bye.